Greetings and salutations. My name is Michael Schwahn, and today we need to talk about the Game Awards. Now, we already did a video going over the nominations and our predictions for those nominations, as well as some potential announcements, world premieres that might happen at the Game Awards. But this particular Game Awards has had a lot of discussion around it, particularly regarding the topic of DLC and whether it should be able to be nominated for categories. This primarily because of Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree being nominated for multiple categories, including Game of the Year itself. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of different takes, a lot of different answers, and I'm here to give you mine. Obviously, I'm here for a conversation, not necessarily to say that my opinion is the right one. But there's also some things that I think we need to take account in terms of precedence. So, with all that said, let's get started. So, first thing we need to do is set some boundaries about what we're going to be talking about, because this is specifically in regards to the Game Awards itself. Now, the Game Awards is probably intentionally named to be incredibly vague, because there are multiple Game Awards shows that take place every year. You have the DICE Awards, you have the Golden Joystick Awards, but for specifically we were talking about the Game Awards hosted by Jeff Keighley, which is the largest Game Awards show when it comes to viewership anyway. It is the largest Game Awards show, and that is the Game Awards. Now, so while most of these other award shows, they will have things like Best DLC, Best Expansion, Best Added Content, or whatever, the Game Awards has not. But the Game Awards is also one of the Game Awards that evolves a lot and a little at the same time, because they add and remove categories at random, and I don't really understand why. And then we keep some categories that are very similar. We have Best Action Game, Best Action Adventure Game, Best Indie, Best Debut Indie, and it's like those are so, oftentimes those categories can look very, very similar, and it's just weird how that ends up working. But speaking of the Game Awards, the question is, when it comes to DLC, and whether DLC should be eligible for nominations in different categories at the Game Awards. Now, they made a special announcement this year that basically saying DLC would be eligible to win categories, which is interesting because they could have just not said anything and let people have their own conversation about it, which people are doing anyway, especially because there have been nominations and even wins by DLC in the past. Looking at the 2023 Game Awards last year is when we had the Phantom Liberty expansion for Cyberpunk 2077. Now, important to note, it was not nominated for Game of the Year. It was nominated for a few categories, some of which like being like Best Performance by Idris Elba, and it did win Best Ongoing Game, but I wouldn't say that is Phantom Liberty getting that award. That is Cyberpunk 2077 getting Best Ongoing Game, as the game launched in a horrendous state, got a lot of updates and polishing and works and reworks done, and then ultimately won Best Ongoing Game, which includes its expansion of the DLC of Phantom Liberty. Sorry as I navigate my way through words. It also got nominated for Best Narrative, and it was nominated for Player's Voice. So it already has nominations in non-Game of the Year categories. And that might be the point that is important. But if we go way back, if we want to roll the clock back 8 years to 2016, back when The Witcher 3 was out, The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine DLC was nominated and won RPG of the Year, which, man, that feels bad. The other role-playing games that were out and nominated at that time were Dark Souls 3, which I think, given the zeitgeist around From Software titles, I'm amazed that that didn't win. But I mean, I guess the current landscape and general atmosphere around From Software is very different from the way that it was back in 2016, especially coming off of Dark Souls 2. But otherwise, we have Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, World of Warcraft Legion, which is interesting because, I mean, there's technically an expansion, but are expansions DLC? I don't know. And maybe that was the argument about Blood and Wine, because I do believe they were classified as expansions rather than necessarily DLC. Whereas you could very easily say that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is an expansion, but it is listed as DLC. And I'm not really sure where the fine line is cut off there in terms of classifying one over the other. And then lastly, the last nomination in that category was Xenoblade Chronicles X, which is surprisingly right on point, considering we just had the announcement of Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition being announced by a shadow drop trailer by Nintendo just in the last couple of weeks. So that's something to look at. We have had things like this be nominated before and win before, but most notably, none of them were ever nominated for Game of the Year. And Shadow of the Erdtree is being nominated for Game of the Year. Now, the ultimate question is, should it be? Now, before the nominations or even that announcement were even revealed, when people outlined the idea of should a DLC be able to win Game of the Year, my immediate thought was to recoil away from it, just knee-jerk back and say, under no circumstance should a DLC win Game of the Year. I don't know if a week later I feel that same way, but I do feel like the battle for winning any category is much harder for a DLC. And the biggest reason that I say that is because when it comes to an expansion or a DLC or what, we're just gonna stick to DLC, okay? It's easier. It's what we're all talking about. I'm gonna stop differentiating between the two. We're gonna talk about DLC, regardless whether it's an expansion or an add-on or what. We're just gonna call it all DLC, okay? When we look at something like Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree or The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Blood and Wine or Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, the problem is that those games, those expansions, those DLCs require things to have already happened, right? Now, there is a different discussion to be had about whether you can give your opinion on something or give something a rating or declare whether something should be Game of the Year or not if you have not played it and or have not finished it. But there requires a significant amount of investment of time from the player in order to even get to the point where the DLC or expansion is accessible to be able to assess that content on its merits of whether it is deserving of the category that it has been nominated for. And I think that's a really important difference of it is not something that just anybody can pick up and play and experience. Even in this circumstance right now where we have had this nomination, if people are like, man, what is the Shadow of the Erdtree thing? Sorry, you can't just pick it up and play it. You have to pick up Elden Ring, play what? I'm not sure how fast you could get to Shadow of the Erdtree, because you do not have to beat the game, but you have to beat a certain boss. And I'd say realistically, minimum, if you were one, good, and two, fast tracking it, and not so good that you're speed running it, you're looking at probably 30 hours minimum, but more realistically, you're looking at 40, 50, maybe even 60 hours to get to the point where you can access Shadow of the Erdtree. And that's just a singular example. And even looking at the other games, like Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is not a small game. By any stretch of the mind is it a small game. And if we look at Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, that is a game that I actually have played all the way through, both Phantom Liberty and the base game itself. I played through the whole thing. I loved it all. I thought Phantom Liberty was incredible. But you still really heavily need to play through a pretty sizable chunk of Cyberpunk 2077 in order to experience Phantom Liberty. And I think that sets a particularly large hurdle to being able to access and enjoy something that has been nominated for a category, where large in everything else in the category and everything else within the entirety of the nominations of the Game Awards, save for like Creator of the Year or Best Esports Team or whatever, you can just pick up and play right then and there, which is part of why I think the hurdle for a DLC to not even just get nominated, but especially win something is incredibly hard to overcome. because on point of some of the games we've already mentioned, talking about things like World of Warcraft Legion. Now, mind you, a lot of MMOs have made it a lot easier to jump in if you want to get into like Final Fantasy 14 Dawn Trail or, you know, World of Warcraft, whichever friggin' expansion we're on now. I have lost track because I haven't played that game in a while because we're really far ahead. I don't know where we are. The War Within, I think that one just ended and now we're on the next one. Regardless, move on. But looking also at some other RPGs, normally it's RPGs that have really, really good DLC. We're going to look at the Xenoblade franchise. So Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3 both had very, very sizable, very long DLC. Because I've seen an argument about like why people felt that maybe Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty shouldn't get a nomination in the way that Shadow of the Erdtree does. Shadow of the Erdtree is bigger than most games. Shadow of the Erdtree adds another 50 to 80 hours of content. You're like, that is a whole nother game. And a lot of people have also said that if Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree was released as Elden Ring 2, that they would have no issue at all with it being nominated. But it wasn't released that way. Instead, it was released as DLC, and so people take issue with it. Where if we take a look at the Xenoblade DLC, so we have Xenoblade 2, man, what is the name of the Xenoblade 2 DLC? I was checking to see if I saw the box next to me. Torna is something of the Torna. Golden Torna? No. Something along those lines. It is also sizable, and also, what is the one for Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Future Redeemed, Future Reclaimed, Future something. It's also big. Like, these are like 20, 30, 40-hour DLCs, depending on how much time you put in them. They are big, they are sizable. Should we have seen them be nominated in probably, like, let's face it, best role-playing game is the only thing those are being nominated in. I mean, in terms of, well, I guess you probably could have seen narrative or performance, depending on a couple of things, so strike that. But should they have been nominated? Maybe. I don't know. But that conversation didn't get had because that's in the past now. And so, what does that mean for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree? Just because things haven't been able to be nominated in the past, does that mean they shouldn't be able to be nominated now? I don't know. But when it comes specifically to Game of the Year, I don't see a DLC being a game. It is an add-on. It is an extension, an expansion, an inclusion. It is not the game itself. It goes on to another game. I have zero issue with DLC being nominated for any category. No, I still don't really like it, actually. I was about to say I don't have any issue with it being nominated for any category that isn't Game of the Year. But they're not games, is the problem. They are part of games. And when you see something like Elden Ring, which won Game of the Year in 2022, should Elden Ring be allowed to win Game of the Year again in 2024? I don't think so. It's already Game of the Year. The Game of the Year getting more content does not make it a new Game of the Year. And I would say that that also applies to every other category, as I talk my way into my own opinion. So I would also say that The Witcher 3 getting best role-playing game for its expansion Blood and Wine was incorrect. I think that that award should have went to something else, because I think The Witcher 3 got some nominations as well, didn't it? Like, that was very, very well received. Here, I have the wiki page right here that you cannot see unless I put it on the screen for you. Yeah, it won Game of the Year in 2015. I was pretty sure that it did. So it already won Game of the Year. It also won Best RPG, which means that The Witcher 3 effectively won Best Role-Playing Game 2 years in a row because of its expansion, which I don't agree with, because it was already Best Role-Playing Game. Giving it more doesn't mean that it re-released. Now, in terms of remasters or remakes, remasters is a little bit of a harder question, but a lot of games that are being remastered, say for The Last of Us type stuff, a lot of those games weren't around for the Game Awards because the Game Awards only dates back to 2014, because the first game that won Game of the Year was it 2013 or 2014? I know Dragon Age Inquisition was one of the very first ones. while I continue to talk, I will just pull it up and then take a look and see what it says, because I know that it's right here on the wiki. Yeah, 2014 was the first year with Dragon Age Inquisition getting Game of the Year, followed by The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt in 2015. And it won multiple categories. So, yeah. I think that's where that problem comes in, inherently, is that then allows games to win multiple years when that's not really what they are. And I think that something like Cyberpunk 2077 winning best ongoing game due to ongoing support, ongoing development, and ongoing improvements, and having an expansion that pushed the game further. I mean, that is literally no different than best ongoing game and best community support. Always, every year, nominations going to Final Fantasy XIV, No Man's Sky, Fortnite, and for some reason, Destiny 2. Look, y'all, just because they keep on releasing expansions does not mean that they have best community support or best ongoing game. Even people that love and adore that game, I have heard nothing but them shitting on it. So let's stop pretending like that game is beloved in a positive light. People have a huge sunken cost fallacy in Destiny 2 and refuse to let it go, including the companies behind it. Moving on. Ultimately, though, I do think that the solution here is that you instead look for ways to give accreditation for the work put into these DLCs through another means. You have forced a square peg into a round hole because of the unwillingness to change in a way that is more form-fitting for the medium. There should be a best DLC, best expansion, best add-on, best whatever category. However you want that to look, however you want to phrase it, that is exactly where that should be and where content like this should go, including things like the Xenoblade Chronicles expansions and whatever else. It could literally, I'm not even joking, you can nominate like DLC events for that kind of stuff too. I would love to see a category that is a nomination for like best live service event, because there's some live service events in games that have just been genuinely incredible and have been, even though they were short-lived, they did a huge, like, the community shaped themselves around that event because of how meaningful it was. Things like the first time that Warzone had the zombies mode into, and I don't mean Call of Duty Zombies, I mean whatever the infection, I can't remember what it was called, when you could turn into a zombie in the Battle Royale Horde mode, and not Pet Horde, Battle Royale mode in Call of Duty Warzone. Or like when Fortnite first did no build, that was a huge event. That's what got me to play Fortnite. And that's what made me enjoy and appreciate Fortnite, was when they added no build, because I had no interest in building. Even things like when Overwatch did their first Halloween event, and that's when the Halloween skin, the Witch Mercy, showed up, and when it was essentially a really bad Call of Duty Zombies, but that was a huge deal. That, you know, is things that I think could have received some sort of attention and didn't. And that's, you know, kind of unfortunate, because these were major moments and things that sometimes there's a game that doesn't get the attention that it needs, but the DLC is something that just completely revolutionizes that game. I mean, in a way, Fortnite itself is that way, because Fortnite itself was originally a base builder horde thing, and then they're like, hey, Battle Royale mode, let's just rip off Minecraft's Hunger Games, booyah, let's go. And then that spawned the world that we're in today when it comes to video games. So at the end of it all, no, Elden Ring should not be nominated. No, Shadow of the Erdtree should not be nominated for Game of the Year. It should not be nominated for Role-Playing Game of the Year. It should not be nominated for Action Adventure Game of the Year, because Elden Ring was already nominated for most, if not all of those, and won a couple of those. And Shadow of the Erdtree is just more of something that is already won. And there should be a category that is used as a way to pay recognition to the efforts that have been put in by the developers on DLC, and that should have its own category. But with all that said, those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours. Put them down in the comments below or catch up with me on social media. There's links down in the description to everywhere that I'm on. I'm not, I realize my schedule for videos and streams is very, very strange right now, but I am still very active on social media. I will very happily respond to your comment, whether it's here on YouTube or if you hit me up on social media. Would love to have this conversation further and for you to share your thoughts as to maybe why something should be included in a category. Please do reach out to me in any way that you see fit. And like I said, I do stream sometimes when I'm able to, when my schedule makes sense. I used to be very consistent, and I am not anymore. But I would really love to see you there. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving it a like. If you want to catch future videos when they show up, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you watch one of the other videos on the channel, or if I do see you in one of those live streams, thank you and enjoy.